Hey guys, I'm Dov, and today I'm back with more Total War Warhammer 2 online action. Today we're back with Mazdamundi leading the Lizardmen, of course, this time against the foul Greenskins. So let's get to the army compositions. The Toad Master himself here up on his dinosaur. This is more or less just to make him an absolute meatbag and give him a ton of HP, which he has. He also has armor-piercing anti-infantry, a nice missile attack as well. Spell loadout, we've got Net of Ammontok, Apotheosis, and the specialized anti-greenskin spell, Arcane Unforging. This is a pretty much must-pick against the Greenskins if you can bring it, if you're playing a faction that can bring it. We've also got Shielding the Old Ones, of course, and Banishment. I tend to cut Ruination of Cities just because it's a lot of RNG and it tends to not really pay out, I find, so tend to not bring that. But in terms of the rest of the army here, we've also got a Rev Crystal and an Ancient Stegodon, so we're definitely going to be just healing spam dinos old school. I know that's not some people's favorite things, but it honestly doesn't work that well anymore, and I think this is one of the few matchups where it's still sort of viable. So again, the Ancient Stegodon, just an absolute meatbag, pretty good combat stats, armor-piercing anti-infantry, with lots of missile damage as well. Got a front line of Saurus warriors mixed with skink cohort with javelins, a couple of chameleon skinks, just two in fact, and some more javelins supporting out on the flanks, and that's pretty much it. Fairly straightforward dino mash army. We actually do have a couple of spear riders hidden, I believe one over here, and that's maybe it, I think so. Anyway, for my opponent, he's got some Orc Boar Biggins, front line of Savage Orcs with a couple of Black Orcs, as well as the Crimson Killers, which is an interesting pick. I'll talk more about these guys in a minute. But Savage Orcs, more Savage Orcs, lots of Savage Orcs. We've also got Goblin Big Boss and another with Wurzag. In terms of his spells, he's got Fist of Gork and Foot of Gork, very interesting. And Effigy to Git, of course. A couple of Night Gobbo Archers, no Rusty Airs, interestingly enough. But yeah, that's pretty much it. So without further ado, let's get the battle underway. And you can see my opponent going to be pushing up the hill here as I start to kind of face off against him. And yeah, it's going to be a rough time, especially for these Savage Orcs, and this is one of the reasons why I pretty much always recommend you bring the Skink Javelins rather than the regular Skink Cohort. These guys are basically Skink Cohort with Javelins, so they're kind of like miners with blasting charges, except they don't do quite as much damage as blasting charges, but they do have poison. That being said, they still do a devastating amount of damage, especially against a lighter troop like Savage Orcs. Just watch the volley get unloaded here, and it's a happy Javelin day to those Orcs running uphill. You can see they're suffering very, very badly, having lost quite a bit of HP and about 6 unit models already. More of the same over here. Swing and a miss with that Foot of Gork, which is a bit unfortunate there. Probably should have waited until those units were engaged in melee. But nonetheless, Black Orcs going to be moving up. Savage Orcs will do okay against the Saurus warriors, but over here there's not really a lot I can do to stop this. Bit of a Sioux Pig action as these pigs ride through and lance down the skinks there. Meanwhile, over on the other side, the Cold One Spear Riders getting the better of these Sioux Pig boys, and they're going to be kind of pushing down the hill and trying to collapse things. Helping to defend the two chameleon skinks, so we're going to be pushing them forward. You can see Banishment and Magic being unleashed here in the main pocket, with magic resistance going on the Lizardmen. I mean, granted, it won't prevent all of the damage from that Banishment, but already Mazdamundi starting to rack it up. 11 kills and climbing, and of course he's standing right on top of these Black Orcs. Gary, the Rev Crystal, having to deal with a couple of Gobbo Big Bosses here, but honestly, he doesn't mind much. The Crimson Killers... fighting here, I guess they are technically fighting. I mean, you can't say they're not fighting. They are actually swinging their axes, but yeah, I'll talk more about them later. Meanwhile, over on this top area, Mazdamundi honestly not taking a whole lot of damage here, just munching through those Black Orcs, which is exactly what I need him to do. You can see Savages not really holding their leadership together. We are starting to compromise the back line here as these Skink Cohort get a hold of the Gobbo Archers, and that's going to be a very cost-effective use of the Skink Cohort. The Cold One Riders, of course, helping to drag things down as well. So it's a bad day for the Greenskins so far. You can see them just being pushed back off the hill. Of course, these Black Orcs are the only ones immune to psychology, so the terror from the 3 big dinos here is going to be a big problem, certainly. And just with the Apotheosis and the Rev Crystal between the two of them, we can basically get as much healing as we need into the big dinos. So I'm not really worried that these guys are coming after Mazdamundi. I mean, Wurzag can try all he wants. He's just going to get smacked by that giant tail. You can see Wurzag suffering pretty badly in terms of his HP, so he definitely does not want to be standing and fighting with Lord Mazdamundi. But, I mean, we did hit him with that Arcane Unforging at the beginning of the battle, so he hasn't got a cast of Wa through the entire battle, which is very, very unfortunate. It's one of the main reasons why I would always recommend you bring that spell if you can against the Greenskins. If you're playing a faction that can, that is. But yeah, you can see the Chameleon Skink's going to pull up and just start unloading inside of these Black Orcs and the Savage Orcs here. Savage Orcs will definitely take a lot of heat. You can see quite a few unit models dropping there. Black Orcs, obviously, with their heavier armor, they'll do okay. And these Crimson Killers are definitely hewing through Saurus nicely. Unfortunately, they have taken a lot of damage themselves. Only 63 kills, which you would expect for a unit that expensive that they would be able to do a little bit better. But more Boar Boys trying to come back around, but again, the Terror is just going to be such a problem for the Greenskins. And they're so far behind on the balance of power, you know, leadership damage and all that, and with Mazdamundi still being so healthy, it looks like another Foot of Gork going down, this time going to be on the Chameleon Skinks, which is not a bad target. It is going to do a pretty good amount of damage to both of them, but too little too late. As I like to say, we're going to unleash another banishment on top of these Black Orcs right here. And yeah, it's going to be a bad day. Gary doesn't mind sitting right on top of the banishment too much. So yep, another Shield of the Old Ones pops up just to protect the few kind of riders that came in here. I believe there were some Cold One riders that came in here. And with Wurzag giving up the fight, the rest of the Greenskins decide that maybe this isn't the fight for them, and they're going to run for the hills. So quick victory for the Lizardmen, and yeah, that Dino Mash strategy used to be a kind of viable tournament strategy in a lot of different matchups. It doesn't work quite so well anymore because there's a lot more elite armor-piercing missiles, and just in general, a lot of factions have better answers to the big dinos now. Greenskins, though, still tend to somewhat struggle with large armored monsters sometimes. They don't necessarily always have the best tools. Granted, they do have some tools that my opponent did bring, and we'll talk about more about those in just a minute. But in terms of the army breakdown here, you can see 92 kills on the Cold One Spear Riders, able to come out of the forest there and get a nice ambush, beat back those Orc Boar Boy Biggins, and then kind of force the flank of my opponent's army there. My opponent, likewise, with some of his Orc Boar Biggins, was able to kind of force my flank a little bit, but he really only ended up wrapping up Skinks. And then when the green tide washed up against the rock of Mazdamundi, it had no choice but to recede because he just didn't budge. But yeah, you can see 58 kills, a couple XP chevrons for the Ancient Stegodon, not too bad there. A lot of those are probably Black Orcs. Chameleon Skinks did okay, 42 kills on Skink Cohort, not too bad. And you consider that most of those probably came against Savage Orcs with quite a few chevrons, and suddenly these guys are wildly cost effective. And again, hopefully you can see why I pretty much always, if you have the points, pretty much always recommend you bring the Skink Cohort with Javelins rather than the regular Cohort. Kind of like how you'd pretty much always bring Miners with Blasting Charges rather than regular Miners. But yeah, Gary did take some heat, but able to chuck out the healing that he needed to. Saurus Warriors kind of getting cut through in the middle, but nonetheless getting quite a few kills as well. So a nice trade there for my opponent. The Orc Boar Boy Biggins, definitely a good pick here. Crimson Killers are not, unfortunately, and I'm not really a big fan of the pick of regular Savage Orcs either. I'll talk a little bit more about why, I guess, right now. So let's get to it. Let's see, custom battle here, and we'll swap on over to the Greenskins. So this is potentially a tough matchup. Wurzag, of course, is pretty much a given in any matchup, although I would not take Foot of Gork here because there's not really going to be a lot of high-value blobs you have to blow up. You can mostly deal with Lizardmen infantry with your own infantry or other tools, so I wouldn't necessarily recommend Foot of Gork here. That being said, here we go. I would definitely recommend. And Fists of Gork, and then just to round things out for Wurzag so that you can get some procs of the Bonewood Staff in the late game, you might want to bring Gaze of Mork or Brain Burst. A Gaze of Mork actually might be good for shooting at a dino. I haven't tried, so take that with a grain of salt, but definitely want to grab both of the items as well. So yeah, and then in terms of the rest of the army, the Goblin Big Bosses might seem good on paper, but they really just fall over when they try and fight big dinos. Crimson Killers are just terrible. They're bad. They're really bad. They're one of the worst regiments renowned in the game, in my opinion, and here's why. Let's just do a quick stat comparison between regular Black Orcs and Crimson Killers. Yeah, most of their stats go up, except for one, which is arguably one of the most important, which is HP. You can see they have about 2,000 less HP than the regular Black Orcs. That's because they have less unit models, but their stats aren't better enough to compensate. Like, they are supposed to do splash damage, but they really don't. They have not that good of melee defense, like 36 melee defense for a unit this expensive, and with only 45 unit models and a limited health pool, means these guys are glass cannons, believe it or not. They just fall over before they can really get the work done that they need to. And due to their low model count, their low melee defense, and their low health, they really just get outbodied super hard, and it really makes it hard for them to be cost effective. So I would leave them at home. Maybe a couple of regular Black Orcs would be better, and we're also going to get a couple of Savage Orc Biggins rather than regular Savages, and a couple of Nasty Skulkers as well. Now, Nasty Skulkers, very, very important. One of the most cost-effective units on the Greenskin roster. They don't have the best stats, but if you can get them in the right situation, get this Opportunist Murder going off with perhaps a couple of other buffs, they can trade way above their weight class. And of course, that Smoke Bomb does help you kind of control your opponent's movements pretty well. Also, so I definitely recommend that. Both the Gobbo Regiments of Renown are pretty much a must pick for me in the front line. 8-peak Loonies, of course, are unbreakable, so they won't run away from dinos. The Warlords boys are immune to psychology and also have armor sundering, both of which are excellent in this matchup. In terms of the rest of the army, Rustiers and actually really like Orc Airboys here. I'll tell you why. If you go ahead and look at their missile damage here, Orc Airboys actually do 6 AP per shot, which is not bad at all. That's one of the highest kind of bow type units for armor piercing damage in the game. So Orc Airboys actually not a bad pick here at all for shooting at dinos, especially with the Rustiers sundering the armor, just to make them that little bit more effective. And then for the rest of the army, you probably want the Broken Tusk Mob, and we're not quite able to afford another Boar Biggin, but we could probably make some adjustments to make things work. But anyway, something like this would probably be pretty solid. You can come in here and maybe just cut you know, one of these random things. Like that leadership buff is probably pretty good, but it's not quite enough either. So let's see. Yeah, I would have to do some serious thinking to see what we would cut here, but you guys get the general idea, hopefully, in terms of fine-tuning that build a little bit. So hopefully you found this interesting and informative. If you guys do like this sort of content, be sure to like, subscribe, hit that bell notification button, so every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thanks again for watching. We'll see you next time.